The gate creaks. It is always the same gate, the same aged wood, swollen with centuries of weather, iron hinges older than memory itself. I arrive just as the morning mist begins to lift, though, in truth, there is no real sunrise in this place. Only a slow silvering of the sky beyond the monastery walls. The stones beneath my sandals are cold and wet with dew. They remember 1,000 mornings before mine. I pause, as I always do, before crossing the threshold. The archway above me bears faint Latin inscriptions, chiseled so long ago they now resemble fossilized vines. I trace them with my eyes, never with my hands. Touch would be too loud. A small door, inset within the heavy gate, yields with a low groan as I push it inward. The scent of old vellum greets me like a friend, soft, earthy, almost sweet. It mixes with the quiet musk of beeswax and the faintest trace of dried lavender, left behind by Brother Lucian, who insists it keeps moths away from the parchments. Within the scriptorium, everything waits in stillness. Long benches and low desks stretch in perfect rows, bathed in a pale wash of morning light from the narrow clerestory windows above. Dust motes drift lazily in the shafts of light, turning slowly in the air, as if undecided whether to rise or fall. It is cold inside, always cold, no matter the season. The stone holds the memory of winter too well. My bench is the third from the right, closest to the eastern wall. My tools await me, arranged precisely as I left them. Quills trimmed and tested, inkstones stacked in graduated hues, carbon black, iron gall, verdigris, and the deep indigo that smells of storm clouds. A small cloth covers the page I began yesterday. I will not uncover it yet. That page belongs to another version of myself, one who had slept. Now I am the silent one. There is a rhythm to this place that speaks louder than voices. Each monk enters alone, quietly. We do not greet each other in words, but with nods, barely perceptible dips of the head, acknowledgments of shared intention. Conversation would only tear the veil of silence we labor so carefully to maintain. It is not silence of absence, but silence of fullness. I set down my satchel, draw out the small bundle of trimmed goose feathers, and choose the one that feels right in the hand. Weight is everything. A too heavy quill drags on the sole. A too light one floats away from meaning. I touch the tip to my tongue lightly, then to the smooth stone of the inkwell cover, sensing the readiness of the nib. In this early hour, before the ink flows, before a single letter is born, I feel closest to what we are truly doing here. We are not simply copying words. We are binding thought to permanence, preserving breath in bone and hide. Each letter a leaf, each sentence a tree, growing into a forest of belief, of doubt, of story. Outside the scriptorium, the world is loud. Markets cry out. Hooves hammer cobblestones. Kings rise and peasants starve. But in here there is only the slow patience of line and loop, stroke and pause. I remember the first time I stepped through this gate, decades ago. I was too young, barely 12. My hands were not yet steady. I spoke too much. But Brother Elric saw something in the way I touched the ink, not merely dipping, but listening. He said I had the quiet inside. I still carry those words, heavier than the heaviest manuscript. The light shifts slightly on the stone wall,
casting a soft amber glow across the eastermost desk. A draught moves through the room, gentle as breath. Somewhere above, a dove coos. The day begins. Brother Adalbert passes behind me, his robes brushing the floor like wind through reeds. He does not speak, but I feel the warmth of his gaze resting on the crown of my head for the briefest moment. A blessing without words. He takes his place near the rear. He works in red ink, always red.
His pages blaze with illuminated suffering, martyrdoms, saints pierced with arrows, the blood always perfect, always poetic. I do not work in red. My pages are quieter, marginalia of vines and stars, small creatures peeking between initials, golden halos that reflect the morning light back into the soul of the reader. I paint the spaces between the words, the breath between thoughts. I unwrap the cloth from my vellum page. It is a leaf of fine calfskin, scraped and stretched and polished to a sheen, a gift from a noble family, I'm told. Their son died young, and they commissioned a psalter in his name. I am to illuminate Psalm 42. As the heart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. I've read it so many times now that it no longer feels like scripture, but like a memory I never lived. The border will be blue, a rare hue and expensive. Lapis lazuli, ground into dust, mixed with honey and egg yolk. A color that once traveled from the mountains of Afghanistan all the way to this quiet monastery in northern France. It feels improper, almost absurd, that so much danger and distance and expense should end in this silent brushstroke on animal skin. And yet, I press my quill to the page. The first letter is a capital A, to be gilded and decorated with the figure of a deer drinking from a stream. The stream will bend like a ribbon, curling into the next stanza, where it will vanish into a swirl of ivy and forget-me-nots. The deer will not look at the viewer. It will look inward. There is comfort in knowing that, centuries from now, someone may open this book, this exact page, and find the deer. They will not know my name. I am not permitted to sign. But they may wonder who I was, and whether I believed the words I copied. I do, and I do not. There are days when I feel the sacredness of each syllable, and there are days when it is simply labor, ink and muscle, repetition and cramp. But still, I return.
Not for glory, or for God even, but for the hush, for the way this place folds time into itself, for the gate that creaks the same way every morning, for the dust in the light. A bell tolls, not the loud one for Mass, but the smaller one hung just above the scriptorium, rung once to mark the hour. I do not look up. My hand continues, steady, as the quill traces the curve of the A. A for anima, soul. A for aqua, water. A for all that waits to be remembered. And still, the gate creaks in my memory, opening endlessly, inviting me inward. I light the candle with deliberate slowness. There is something sacred in the act, though I am told often that fire is merely a tool, like ink or thread. But I cannot help it. This tiny flame, born of flint and breath, feels like a soul awakened. It catches the wick with a faint shoof, and then trembles there, alive and uncertain, swaying with the smallest movement in the air. I cup my hand around it, not to shield it, but to admire its dance. Around me, the others follow suit. One by one, their candles bloom into life. The scriptorium, dim and solemn only moments ago, is now freckled with light. Each desk becomes its own universe, its own sun, orbiting a monk and his manuscript. The wax is yellowed, smooth to the touch, faintly fragrant. Brother Lucian says it's mixed with thyme this season. I lean closer. Yes, there it is. A soft herbal trace beneath the warmer scent of melting wax. These small choices, timed candles, lavender sachets, rosewater used to stretch the vellum, they are not mandated by any rule. They are gestures, little acts of gentleness in a life that asks so much silence. The candlelight touches the edge of the gold leaf on yesterday's work. It flickers, alive. It is not true gold, not entirely. We use a mixture called shell gold, powdered metal bound with gum arabic and water, applied with a squirrel hair brush so fine it feels like painting with breath itself.
But under the dancing light, it becomes more than pigment. It radiates, it speaks. Sometimes I wonder if it is the light that transforms the gold, or if it is the gold that teaches the light how to shine. I dip my brush in clean water and prepare to activate the gilding. The page has cooled overnight. The gold waits patiently in its thin lines, laid down with painstaking care. I pass the brush over the curves of an illuminated D, and slowly, softly, the sheen returns. A subtle glimmer, like dew catching moonlight. There is no rush in this place. Speed is the enemy of devotion. Even Brother Matthias, who once worked so swiftly he completed an entire homily in 3 days, now takes his time. His hand trembled for weeks after that attempt. "The words turned on me," he once whispered. "They punished me for haste." Now he hums when he writes, soft, low melodies, usually modes from the liturgy, sometimes improvised. It comforts him, I think, though he pretends not to notice when we hum along. I have no melody, only rhythm. Brush, lift, breathe. Brush, lift, breathe. I apply the gold not as ornament, but as reverence. The monks of earlier centuries used illumination to make the word divine, literal light on the page. It was meant to dazzle the eye, to elevate Scripture into the realm of the miraculous. I understand that intent, but I seek something gentler, a kind of whisper glory. Not the blinding sun, but the shimmer in a dewdrop, the blink of a firefly on a summer night. Gold that does not command, but invites. The vellum is warm now under my palm. My candle has grown shorter by a finger's width. Time here is not measured in hours, but in wax. Behind me, Brother Everard stirs. He is the only one allowed to work on the Book of Hours, a richly commissioned piece meant for a duchess whose name I am forbidden to speak. Her servants brought peacock feathers once to be ground into pigment. The greens were magnificent, but volatile. The page is wrinkled with humidity, and Everard wept quietly for 3 days before he dared to begin again. Now he works only in the mornings, when the air is dry and his fingers steady. There is something quietly ironic about the fact that we are copying books for those who cannot read them. Nobles commission psalters they do not understand, for children too young to pray. But perhaps that is not the point. The books are not for reading, they are for possessing. They are symbols of status, of lineage, of divine proximity. We are the hands, they are the eyes. I do not mind, truly.
There is a certain peace in knowing that your work will be admired even if not understood. It frees me from the burden of explanation. I am not here to be known. I am here to listen to the quiet between letters. My candle wavers. A draught, perhaps, from the northern window. Or maybe Brother Anselm moving too quickly near the shelves. He is young, only recently accepted into the scriptorium, and has not yet learned the art of motionless presence. He knocks over ink bottles, nudges stools. But he is earnest, and when he smiles, it is as if the entire monastery exhales. He works on genealogies, trees of blood and name. He does not yet know how to make the roots curve naturally, how to let the branches hold weight. His trees look too eager, too immediate. They will soften with time, like him. I remember being like that. So quick to impress, to master, to complete. But illumination does not reward completion. It rewards surrender. A finished page is not an achievement. It is a letting go. I return my attention to the margin of my page, where a small fox waits to be born. He will be curled in the corner of Psalm 42, head resting on tail, eyes closed. He does not belong to the scripture, but to the silence around it. A guardian, perhaps, or a dream. The fox was not in the original plan. He arrived in my mind as I walked through the cloister garden yesterday. A quick rustle in the ivy. A flicker of red-brown fur. Perhaps it was a real fox. Perhaps it was memory. Either way, he has asked to be included. So I mix a soft russet, ochre and red lake, with a touch of carbon for depth, and begin the curve of his back. One stroke at a time, I feel him take shape. His form echoes the shape of the letter D above him, their curves in silent conversation. I add a single dot of white for his eye, not open, but present, a soul within the page. When I step back, I see that he belongs, not as ornament, but as witness, a secret companion for the reader who dares to look closely. Another candle goes out nearby, its wick exhausted. A soft spiral of smoke rises, bends, dissolves. No one speaks. We only watch, then return to our work. These flames are not eternal, but their echoes linger in gold and ink and silence. As the day deepens, so does the light. Not brighter, warmer, more golden, more forgiving. The candle at my desk now leans slightly. Its wax has puddled into an odd, beautiful shape, like a melted cathedral, collapsed gently into its own shadow. I do not correct it. Beauty need not be perfect to be holy. And as I press the final gold line into place, I think, perhaps that is what we do here. We create small sanctuaries, not grand churches, not declarations, but quiet places where light can rest. The page stares back at me, unwritten, unmarked, unpromised. It is the untouched surface of a life not yet lived, white, soft, and breathing. The parchment curls slightly at the edges, responding to the chill of the morning, or perhaps the tremble of my hand. It is blank, yes, but not empty. Within its silence, I can already hear the echoes of words waiting to take shape. Each page begins like this. Each one is a threshold. I run my fingers lightly over the vellum. It is smooth, taut, warm from being held under my palm.
This one comes from a young calf. I can tell by the fineness of its texture.
The skin was prepared well, scraped clean with a crescent-shaped lunellum blade, stretched tight on the frame, dusted with chalk. The work of another's hands has brought it to this perfect stillness. It feels almost disrespectful to mark it. But I must. I reach for the ruling frame, a thin wooden template with grooves, and begin to score faint lines into the page using a piece of lead. These guidelines are invisible from afar, but they will carry the architecture of everything to come. Without them, the letters would drift like clouds, unmoored and meaningless. There is an odd intimacy in this phase of the work. The page has no voice yet, no direction. It receives everything. Each line I draw is a promise I must keep. Sometimes I wonder if the parchment feels anticipation, if it somehow remembers the sound of the calf's heartbeat, and now waits to be reborn, not as flesh, but as story. Outside, I hear the faint bleating of sheep from beyond the cloister walls. Their voices rise like a hymn, accidental and pure. The rhythm of the countryside continues, indifferent to the slowness inside these walls. Seasons turn, harvests are gathered, children are born. But in here, a single page may take a week. A full codex may take years. Brother Theobald, now retired from illumination, spent 17 years on a single gospel. He lost vision in one eye from the strain, and still he weeps when he touches the binding. "It is my son," he says, "my longest prayer." I wonder what my prayer will look like when it is complete. The blank page seems to ask that same question of me now. I ready the ink. Today I will work in iron gall, a deep brownish black made from crushed oak galls, rainwater, and a touch of vinegar. The mixture has aged well, thick and strong. It bites into the page slightly, leaving behind a line with a faint metallic sheen. It is permanent. Once set, it cannot be removed, not with water, not with time. Every mistake I make here will last longer than I will.
That knowledge should bring terror, but instead it offers peace. There is freedom in knowing that imperfection is inevitable. The illuminated manuscripts we revere most, those enshrined in abbeys and cathedrals, contain errors, miswritten lines, forgotten saints, a second line squeezed above a too short margin. Even the most divine texts bear the fingerprints of fallibility. Perhaps that is why they move us. I lower my quill to the page and begin the first letter. M. Large, majestic, meant to introduce the phrase multis temperibus Domini loquebatur. In many times the Lord spoke. It is not yet the illuminated initial, that will come later, but this first line must still carry weight. It is the threshold through which the reader will step into the word. The tip of the quill glides smoothly, a gentle whisper against the vellum. The ink darkens as it settles. The shape of the M widens, its arches bowing slightly. Not stiff, but proud. It is a letter with a spine. I pause, breathe, and begin the next. As I work, I think of all the others who have shaped these same words before me. Countless scribes in lands I will never see, languages I will never learn, all breathing life into the same ancient lines. The page beneath my hand becomes a shore touched by many waves. There is comfort in that continuity.
Brother Amalric, old, near blind, and nearly silent, often says, "We do not write words, we invite them to return." The page is only lost until it is remembered again, he whispers. I used to think he was mad. Now I think he may be right. I continue writing line by line until I reach the bottom margin. My letters are smaller now, tighter. My back begins to ache. But the ache is familiar, an old companion. It reminds me that I am still here. A gust of wind presses against the stained glass window at the far end of the scriptorium. The colored panes shimmer. A shaft of blue light falls across my page, illuminating the lower margin.
For a moment, it looks as though the ink itself glows. Perhaps I am not writing alone. In the bottom corner, I begin to plan a flourish. Not yet an image, but a gesture. A vine, perhaps, or a comet trailing behind the sentence. The margins are where the soul of a manuscript lives. The main text carries the doctrine, the theology, but the margins, that is where imagination breathes. I have drawn birds playing lutes, snails jousting with knights, a nun milking a dragon. Once I painted a man reading a book that contained another man reading a book. My margins are quiet jokes, dreams, prayers, warnings. They are the voice I am not allowed to speak with. Not all monks approve. Brother Hugo believes margins should remain clean, unadorned. The word needs no ornament, he says. But I believe the word needs company, companions in the quiet. The fox from yesterday peeks out from the facing page, his eye just visible in profile. I smile. He knows he is not alone. At midday the bell rings again. Lunch will be served. Simple fare, barley bread, lentil stew, perhaps a slice of pear if the orchard has been kind. I should leave the desk, rest my hands, but I linger. This blank page is no longer blank. It carries now the beginnings of thought, the first tremblings of story. It is still quiet, yes, but not silent. It hums with promise, each letter a footprint, each space a breath. And as I set down my quill, I offer a final glance to the unfilled space still below. There is so much yet to say. My quills are not mere instruments. They are companions, each with a temperament, a rhythm, a voice of its own. Some are firm, confident, eager for bold lines. I know them by feel, not by sight. Today I choose one I trimmed last week, cut from the flight feather of a gray goose. Its nib is fine and even, angled slightly left from the natural curve of the shaft. It has been hardened over a flame, then scraped to sharpness with a penknife worn smooth from years of shaping breath into letters. Before writing, I test it again on scrap vellum. One word, drawn slowly. Silenteum. Silence. The lines flow true. I dip the quill into the inkstone. The ink darkens the tip instantly, climbing up the shaft as if eager. But I must resist haste. I let the excess fall back into the bowl, tapping once against the rim. The ink must rest on the nib like dew on a leaf, not so little that it dries, not so much that it floods. Balance is everything. The ink I use today is homemade, like most of what we trust in this room. It is iron gall, deep and rich, brewed from crushed oak galls, iron salts, and aged for months in a jar that once held honey.
When fresh, it smells sharp, like rain on stone. A good ink speaks before it touches the page. I remember Brother Alcuin's lesson. The best ink is like the best man, dark, deep, and quiet, until called. I begin a new line. The quill scratches faintly, a whisper against the vellum. Each stroke is deliberate. Down, pause. Up, pause. Curve, pause. The rhythm is so slow, it resembles prayer. In truth, it is prayer, one formed not by voice, but by attention. Outside, I can hear the bells ringing from the infirmary tower. One chime. Perhaps someone has passed, or perhaps someone is now well. In either case, the world changes, quietly, as I form the next letter. E. A curved spine, full of breath. I glance at the inkwell, then at the page. The consistency is still good, but it's changing slightly, evaporating, thickening with time. Ink is alive. The quill must be rinsed every so often, or it crusts at the tip and begins to drag, turning strokes into scars. I wipe the nib with a strip of linen and begin again. Every so often I sharpen the quill. It's a delicate procedure, a small blade, a steady hand. One wrong flick and the nib splinters, useless.
But when done right, the point emerges like a revelation, slender, clean, ready to speak again. When I was a novice, I broke quills daily. Not just snapped tips, but full collapses, ruined shafts, ink blots splashed across sacred texts. I wept once. Brother Anselm saw and simply said, "The page forgives, if you do." He was right. Eventually, I learned. Patience is not passivity. It is fidelity, returning again and again to the same task with the same care, even when the results are slow, even when no one will see the effort beneath the surface. Patience is not what we do when we wait. It is how we act while we wait. At the far side of the scriptorium, Brother Felix sneezes. Once, twice, then a sigh. Parchment dust, perhaps. He works with pigments and gesso, and he has a tendency to forget how finely ground those powders must be. His fingers are always stained, blue, red, green. He looks like a man who wrestled with rainbows. We trade glances, but not words. There is an agreement among us all. Words spoken here must be as necessary as those written. Anything more is noise. Back to the quill. I write the word memoriam, memory. The line trembles slightly. My wrist aches today more than usual. I shift my grip, press less firmly. It helps. The ink bleeds slightly on the left serif, a tiny blot where it should not be. I press a clean scrap of linen to it gently, lifting the excess. It leaves behind a darker smudge, one that may fade in time, or not. I do not correct it. Imperfections have their own truth. I move to the margin, drawing the faint outline of a climbing vine that will eventually bloom into an initial capital. The vine coils gently, reaching into the text like ivy reaching into stone. It does not overtake the words, it listens to them. The quill is not enough for this work. I reach instead for a brush, sable hair, trimmed to a point fine as a spider's leg. It dips silently into a prepared wash of green, verdigris mixed with egg white. The color is alive. It shimmers faintly, smells faintly of vinegar and copper. On the page, it leaves behind a trail like light filtered through leaves. The vine twists upward. A leaf, another, a curl. The shape is organic, intuitive. I do not plan these margins with sketches. I allow the brush to wander, as the mind wanders during prayer. It finds beauty by accident. One leaf looks too large. I lean in, carefully trimming it with a second line, narrowing its edge. Now it fits. Now it rests in harmony with its companions. I once read a fragment from a Greek philosopher, his name escapes me, who said, "Art is the movement of the soul made visible." Here in the scriptorium, I believe that, not as metaphor, but as truth. My soul today moves slowly, with the burden of memory. I dreamed last night of my mother's hands. She was a weaver before the plague. I used to watch her mend torn cloth with a calm so profound it seemed holy. She never rushed, never wasted motion. Even in poverty, her stitches were elegant. She used to say, "If you make something beautiful with love, you will never be poor." I wonder what she would say if she could see me now, hunched over a page that will one day rest on a noblewoman's silk-draped lap. Would she be proud? Would she ask why I do not sign my work? I pause, staring at the half-drawn vine. The brush hovers over the page, dripping slightly. I whisper a small prayer, not for the nobility, not for my fellow monks, not even for the reader who will someday hold this page, but for her, for the woman whose hands taught me patience long before quills ever did. I return to the quill, dipping it into fresh ink. The line continues, letter by letter, word by word. The weight of silence deepens, like snow falling softly on a hillside. Brother Hugo begins to snore faintly, 2 benches away. He will deny it later. I smile and keep writing. The symbol is not the thing. And yet, when I draw it, it feels like more than ink. A cross at the head of a psalm, a halo ringed in gold, a fish hidden in the looping descender of a letter G. None of these images are alive in the flesh, but something within them breathes. They whisper, not to the eyes, but to the heart. Today I work on the margin of a canticle, a song of longing, of exile, of desperate hope. The Latin words are rigid, formal, de profundis clamavi a te, Domine. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. But between the careful lines, I feel the trembling. Someone, long ago, wept those words before they were written. Their fear echoes in my hand as I shape the illuminated capital D. I trace the curve slowly. Inside the bowl of the D, I will place a small boat lost in a storm. The sea will swirl in tight spirals, impossibly dense for its size. The sail will strain against the wind. A figure, barely visible, will hold a torch that glows not with flame, but with the faint shimmer of gold leaf. It is not literal. The Psalms never speak of boats, but the soul does drift. It does cry out across waters, and symbols speak where language falters. Not all symbols are divine. Some are deeply human. In the margins of an earlier page, I placed a wounded lion curled into itself, licking its paw, not to represent strength, no royalty, but grief. No reader will know what I meant, but perhaps someone, years from now, will look upon that lion and feel less alone. The monks who taught me did not explain symbols, they showed them. A chalice blooming into lilies,
a pelican feeding its young with blood from its breast, a phoenix rising from ash beside the name of Christ. These were not decorations, they were prayers with feathers and fire. Brother Everard once told me that every symbol is a doorway, but he never said where they lead. The first time I painted a halo, I ruined it. I remember it clearly, my hand trembling as I tried to place the gold leaf inside a thin ring of glue.
The breath of my own panic made the flake flutter, then fold in on itself like a dying insect. It stuck crookedly to the page, beyond repair. I scraped it off with the edge of a fingernail, leaving a dull scar. The saint's head was left bare. I cried that night, not because I had failed to decorate the saint, but because I had robbed them of their light. Now, years later, I lay halos with ease, but each time I do, I still hold my breath. I prepare the bowl, a red clay mixed with glue, and apply it in a fine circle around the head of a kneeling figure. I wait. When it is tacky, I lift a square of gold leaf with a breath of air and float it gently into place. It clings. I burnish it with a polished stone, and the light bends toward it. The saint is crowned. And yet, I wonder, did she ask for this? Did the real woman centuries ago long for gold around her face? Or did she prefer the soil, the ache of kneeling, the quiet of unseen prayer? Sometimes I think our symbols say more about us than about heaven. Today, Brother Lucien paints a miniature of the Ascension. He has chosen to render the soles of Christ's feet just visible above the clouds, a quiet joke we have all come to love. It is not irreverent. If anything, it is endearingly human. The Word made flesh, now departing, leaving behind only footprints and wind. That, too, is a symbol, and it makes me smile. I dip my quill into red ink. This red is vermilion, brilliant and dense, with a subtle scent of earth and smoke. I use it sparingly, only for words of deep importance, names of apostles, the titles of psalms, the breath between truths. Red is not for emphasis, it is for heartbeat. As I write the name Maria, I slow my hand. Each letter must rise from the page as if it knows it will last. M, A, R, I, A. The ink pools briefly at the tip of the final A, as if unsure whether to stop. I blot it gently. There is a moment after each sacred name where the silence deepens, not out of obligation,
but out of respect. We do not speak aloud in the scriptorium, but here, in the hush of labor, I sometimes feel I can hear the names we write, echoing backward through centuries of reverence. Not every name is holy, of course. Some manuscripts include the names of donors, nobles, clerics long since forgotten. Their names must also be written with care, but they do not sing as the others do. Their syllables lie flat, heavy with the weight of intention. Still, I write them. All names deserve dignity. Even Judas, when his name appears, is written in the same hand. That is the discipline. We do not decide who is worthy. We write as if each word might become sacred in the next breath. Above my page, a tiny figure watches. It is a marginal creature I drew days ago, a winged cat, perched like a gargoyle, tail curled neatly around its feet. Its face is wise.
or perhaps simply curious. I painted it without planning to, letting my brush wander as I listened to the wind outside. Now it sits frozen forever, beside a passage about divine judgment. A quiet joke, or a challenge? Symbols whisper, but they also question. Sometimes, in the flickering candlelight, I look at my own pages and wonder what future readers will think. Will they understand the meanings I folded into these margins, the tears I hid in the curve of a letter, the small joys tucked into the corner of a frame? Will they find the humor in a dragon sipping tea beside Psalm 9? Or the sorrow in a rose drawn with just one petal fallen? I do not know, but perhaps it does not matter. The act of creating is itself an offering. I place these symbols like bread on an altar, not knowing who will eat or when. I only know that someone might, and that is enough. At the top of the next page, I begin a new illumination, a garden scene to accompany the canticle of creation. Trees, birds, rivers, not literal ones, but imagined, more dream than reality, the kind of garden that could only grow in the pages of a book.
As I sketch the first tree, I pause. What if paradise is not a place, but a page? There is a blue that holds eternity. Not sky blue, not the pale hue of morning mist, or the cold gleam of northern lakes. No, this blue is deeper, darker than prayer, brighter than silence. A blue so rich it seems to hum just beneath the surface of vision. We call it ultramarine. It comes from a place I will never see. The monks who prepare our pigments tell stories of its origin. Mountains in distant lands, Afghanistan, they say, where men dig into the veins of rock to find stones the color of oceans they have never touched. These stones are carried by caravan across desert and sea, through cities whose names vanish into dust. They pass through hands blistered from travel and trade, wrapped in silk, guarded by knife and oath, until at last they arrive here. Not as stones, but as dust. Crushed, ground, purified with oil and lye and care, turned into pigment, turned into devotion. And then handed to me, in a small shell bowl, the inside lined with white chalk to better reflect the color. It shimmers. I dip my brush slowly, letting the bristles soak in the pigment. It is heavier than other paints. It settles more deeply. I must stir it often to keep the particles afloat. The monks call it the color that sinks, not for its sorrow, but for its dignity. Ultramarine is expensive, priceless even. Only the most sacred pages deserves its use. Today I paint the robes of the Virgin. The blue folds begin at her shoulder, flowing down like fabric touched by moonlight. The weight of the pigment gathers in the creases, deepening the shadows. I mix in a touch of lead white to lighten the edges, to suggest softness where the cloth bends toward the light. It is not just decoration. It is theology in color. The choice to paint her robes in ultramarine is a kind of reverence. It says, here is worth. Here is purity that cannot be spoken aloud.
Here is a mystery too sacred for words, made visible only in hue. I once asked Brother Lucian why we reserve ultramarine for Mary. He smiled,
Because gold is for kings, he said, but blue is for miracles. That stayed with me. Sometimes I wonder about the man who first found this stone in the mountain. Did he know he was holding holiness in his hands? Did he feel the sacred press into his skin as he chipped away at rock and shadow? Or was it just another burden to sell? We take so much from the earth to bring light to the page. Gold crushed and bound, stones burned and sifted, plants plucked at dawn and dried in bundles on monastery windowsills. The black ink I use daily comes from fire and smoke, the red from cinnabar, the green from verdigris, sharp as vinegar. Even the parchment, once a calf, now a page. And yet none of it feels wasted. It is as if each of these things, once alive, once whole, finds new purpose in the margins of a book. They do not die, they transform. I brush another stroke across the virgin sleeve. The pigment spreads evenly, slow and smooth. I press lightly at the corner, allowing the paint to pool in a single shadowed fold. My breath slows. The room is quiet. No scraping, no turning of pages, no shifting of stools. Even the usual coughs and sighs seem suspended. The other monks are watching me, I realize, or rather, watching the blue. It's rare to witness it in use. I do not lift my eyes. I continue painting. The hem of the robe will have a narrow border of gold laid down tomorrow, but for now the blue carries all the meaning. It needs no companion. When I step back, I see that the figure now holds the space. She draws the eye, not with her form, but with her stillness. A stillness so intense it ripples through the page like windless water. This is what we aim for. Not accuracy, not spectacle, but presence. A figure that does not shout, but waits.
I clean my brush with care, drawing it through linen soaked in vinegar water. The pigment comes off slowly, reluctantly, as if it too prefers the page. The bowl of blue still glows faintly on my desk. I cover it with a slip of wood, then set it aside. We will use it again, carefully, sparingly. Ultramarine is not a color you waste. I remember the first time I used it. I was still a novice, working on a small book of hours for a merchant's daughter. I begged Brother Everard to let me paint the sky behind a tiny Annunciation scene. He hesitated. Supplies were limited, but agreed. "One stroke," he said. "Use it well." I remember the terror in my hand, the sweat on my brow, the way the pigment bloomed under the brush like a secret revealed. That single stroke held more color than I had ever seen, more weight than I could name. It was a beginning. Now, years later, I no longer fear the blue, but I do not take it lightly. It reminds me of the distances we carry in our hands, of the mountains that gave their stone, of the hands that crushed it, of the prayers that asked for color to hold faith. There is irony here, I suppose, that the purest color, the holiest pigment, must be mined from the earth with the same tools used for war. Pickaxe, hammer, flame. Violence births beauty. The mountain bleeds. The page is healed. A paradox as old as Scripture. In the next folio, I will illuminate a garden,
Eden before the fall. I will use greens, golds, soft pinks, but in the center I will place a small stream running clear and deep, and at its edge a pool of still water. And in that water I will paint a reflection, not of Eve, not of Adam, but of a patch of sky, just one small echo of that impossible blue, a reminder that heaven too leaves fingerprints. He enters without sound. He always does, like a shadow cast without light, like a breath that forgets to disturb the air. The master of the scriptorium does not need to speak.
His presence carries the weight of decades, pressed into silence like a seal into wax. Brother Audric. He is older than parchment, or so it feels. His beard is the color of linen hung too long in the sun, faded but clean. His hands are marked by ink, time, and memory, though they no longer hold a quill. Not often. These days he walks slowly among us, pausing at benches, glancing at pages, never commenting, only watching. When I was younger, I feared his gaze. Not for its coldness, it was never cold, but for its intensity. His eyes do not merely see, they measure. They feel the breath between brushstrokes, the hesitation in a curve, the pride in a gilded edge. To be watched by Brother Audric is to be known. Now I wait for it. This morning, as I work on the flourishes surrounding the Virgin's robe, I sense his approach long before I hear it. The silence thickens slightly. The air takes on weight. My hand, once steady, trembles just enough to change the line. He stops behind me. No words. Only breath. The faint sound of fabric moving as he leans forward. I do not look up. No one looks up when he watches. It is not reverence. It is self-preservation. If he disapproves, he will say nothing. If he approves, he will say nothing. Either way, you are changed. He stays for several minutes. Then a sound, barely audible, the slight exhale of breath through nose, like a man nodding in silence. And then he moves on. I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It is not approval I seek from him. It is alignment. To know that my lines, my colors, my choices, though mine, belong within the tradition he embodies. His silence is not passive. It is the silence of a man who has already spoken through thousands of pages. He no longer needs ink. They say he once illuminated an entire book of Revelation alone. 15 years, no assistance, no interruptions. Every beast, every trumpet, every sealed scroll rendered in impossible detail. The manuscript still rests in the Abbey library, though we are forbidden to touch it. I have only glimpsed it once, opened to a page with a seven-eyed lamb surrounded by stars. The eyes of the lamb looked back at me. Some say Brother Audric lost something in those years, that he speaks less because he gave too much of his soul to the pages. But I do not believe that. I think he's simply found what the rest of us are still searching for. He is not quiet from loss. He is quiet from completion. When he was still active, he never rushed. They say he once spent 3 weeks on a single illuminated letter an E no larger than a coin. The letter sat at the head of a genealogy, and he filled it with vines that became ladders, and ladders that became branches, and at the very center, a single sparrow. The monk who copied the text had asked, "Why a sparrow?" Brother Audric replied, "Because no one will ask." Now his silence is its own kind of artistry. When he passes by Brother Anselm's desk, I see the novice straighten his spine, trying not to smudge the wet ink on his elbow. Audric pauses, then adjusts a pigment jar, only slightly, only enough to catch a different angle of light. A correction not in word, but in shadow. It is enough. The work improves. I often wonder how a man becomes like him. Is it time? Sacrifice? A certain giving away of the self? There is a stillness around him that feels like a stone warmed by centuries of sun. It does not speak. It radiates. When he kneels during Vespers, even the elder monks seem to match his posture, not from imitation, but from gravity. Years ago, I found a marginal note in one of the older manuscripts, written in a hand I now recognize as his. Just 2 words. Bene quiescit. He rests well. No context, no image. Just those words in the corner of a psalm about storms. I think of that phrase often. He rests well. Perhaps that is what he teaches us now, not through critique, but through presence. How to rest within the work. How to find stillness not at the end, but in the act itself. When I illuminate, I often feel restless, a striving, a need to perfect each curve, to hide each error. But when I watch him move, I sense no striving, only attention, only care. He never lectures, he never interrupts. Once I asked him how to draw a lion's mane. Mine always looked too symmetrical, too artificial. He took my quill, turned it upside down, and gently tapped it against the parchment. Small, uneven marks, like grass in wind. Not every hair grows in the same direction, he said. Then he walked away. That was all. And yet I have never drawn a lion the same way since. Sometimes I imagine what he dreams about. If in sleep he sees the pages he once loved. If the saints he painted return to him. If the animals in the margins speak. I hope so. I hope his silence is filled with music only he can hear. In the afternoons, he often sits by the western window, where the light fades last. He watches the sun move across the stones, marking time not by bells, but by the way light leaves. I have never seen him fall asleep. Even in stillness, he watches. Even in silence, he speaks. Today, after he has made his rounds, I find myself working slower. Not out of fear, but out of care. His presence lingers like incense. It asks nothing but honesty. My lines soften, my margins breathe. The colors blend more kindly. I am not trying to impress him. I am trying to listen to the silence he left behind. They grin at me from the corners, toothy, twisted, and utterly delighted by their own absurdity. Little gargoyles crouched in the margins, clinging to the vines, riding the backs of birds, peering out from behind illuminated capitals with wide, unblinking eyes. They have no place in doctrine, and yet they have made a home for themselves in holy texts. I do not remember when I began drawing them. At first, it was small things. A monkey playing a harp, a man chasing his own hat, a rabbit lecturing a fox. They emerged, uninvited, in the blank spaces that begged for meaning. Not blasphemy, never that, just mischief, a kind of visual laughter beneath the solemn weight of the word. Brother Hugo disapproves, of course. He believes the margins should remain pure, filled only with vines, flowers, perhaps a well-behaved bird if it sings a holy tune. But I do not believe holiness and humor must be strangers. Did not the psalmist dance before the ark? Did not the prophets weep and laugh in the same breath? And what is a gargoyle, if not a kind of medieval smile? Today, I paint one in the lower corner of a page devoted to the Book of Wisdom. It is small, no larger than the head of a pin. A creature with the wings of a bat, the ears of a donkey, and the wide grin of a man who knows he is not welcome, but has stayed anyway. He holds a scroll that reads, Sicut infans gaudeo. Like a child, I rejoice. Perhaps no one will see it. Or perhaps a future reader, centuries from now, will glance down from the weight of a long passage and find this ridiculous face, and smile. And in that moment, the book will breathe again. I paint its tongue last, pink, absurd, joyful. It flicks out of its mouth like the last word in an argument no one invited it to. We do not speak of it, but every illuminator has left something strange behind. A pig playing bagpipes, a nun riding a snail, a bishop being chased by geese. Some call it satire, some call it madness. I call it resistance. Not to faith, but to control. In the body of the manuscript, everything must follow order. The scribe's hand is uniform, the rubricator's red exact, the margins precise. But the illuminator, we live in the borderlands, between text and image, meaning and play. That is where freedom lives. I dip my brush into a pale blue, soft as morning milk, and begin the outline of another figure. This one, a hybrid bird with a human eye, and a crown far too large for its head. It balances precariously on a branch that curls toward the psalm's final verse. I add a worm poking up from the branch, grinning back. No one will know what it means. That's the point. The margins are not for answers. They are for secrets. As I paint, I remember a lesson from my youth. Brother Thibal, who worked mostly in the archives, once pulled me aside. "Look closely," he said, handing me a volume from the early 9th century. Not at the text, at the edges. There, drawn in faded brown ink, barely visible, was the figure of a man tugging at the base of a pillar. The pillar supported a holy throne above, where Christ sat in majesty. The man was smiling. "Do you see?" Thibal said. Even then, they were laughing. Why? Why include humor, folly, even critique in books meant for prayer? Because we are human. Because perfection without play becomes tyranny. Because laughter, too, is a kind of reverence, an admission of our smallness beneath the infinite. The gargoyles remind me of that. They remind me that we are not machines, that the hand may tremble, that the brush may wander, that the soul, even when bowed in worship, sometimes sticks out its tongue. And I think, if God has truly made all things, then surely He made room for the strange, for creatures with too many legs and not enough sense, for monks who talk in their sleep,
for pages where wisdom rides on the back of a grinning goat. Sometimes, when I grow tired of the careful lines, of the gold that must glisten just so, of the letters that must not lean, I let myself sketch freely. It is dangerous, this pleasure, but necessary. Today, I draw a tower with tiny legs running away from a knight who tries to climb it. In the base of the tower, I add a face, weary, amused.
The caption beneath it, written in minute Gothic script, Spero te invenire alibi. I hope you find me elsewhere. A joke, but also, perhaps, a truth. Sometimes I hope to find myself elsewhere, outside these walls, beyond the gate, in a forest, at a seaside, in the embrace of a life I cannot name. But then I return to the page, because here too is a kind of forest, a sea of lines, a life drawn in pigment and breath. And the gargoyles? They are my footprints, proof that I passed through, that I was not only a hand, but a person, that I saw the weight of holy things and smiled anyway. The bell tolls the hour. I close my inkwell, leaving the tiny tongue of the bat-eared creature still drying. It will gleam faintly when the light hits it, and then it will wait, for years, centuries perhaps, until someone dares to look closely. And in that closeness, they will find not just theology, but delight. The kind of delight that whispers, even here you are not alone. There are paw prints in the margin, not painted, not drawn, real. Dark smudges that trail diagonally across the bottom of a folio I had left to dry. 4 perfect impressions, spaced just so. A 5th, partial, where the paw must have slipped. And then, further up the page, a small chaos of ink, as if the animal had paused to lick the offending foot. It is not the first time, nor, I suspect, will it be the last. The culprit, as always, is Matilda, a tabby of uncertain origin and even less certain temperament. She belongs to no one and everyone, a permanent resident of the monastery, whose authority is rivaled only by the abbot himself. No door hinders her, no rebuke slows her. She walks where she pleases, especially across history. I find her now, curled on a folded robe atop a storage chest, eyes half-lidded in a posture of supreme indifference. She watches me with the vague recognition of a being who understands she has caused trouble, but refuses to acknowledge it. "Do you regret it?" I whisper. She blinks, slowly. No. The prints are not deep, only surface marks where the ink had not yet dried. The black pigment has smeared slightly, but not ruined the letter forms. Still, the damage is visible. It always is. I could scrape the surface, perhaps, attempt to lift the top layer with a razor, or add a vine to cover it. But I won't. Instead, I fetch a clean cloth, dampened with vinegar water, and gently blot the worst of the smear. The rest I leave, because this too is part of the book's story. I remember once, in my earliest training, seeing a manuscript from the 9th century, a gospel book with similar paw prints marching across the bottom margin of John. Faint, brown, nearly invisible. The scribe had written in tiny unsealed letters beside them, "Here a cat walked where the word lay, and we did not stop her." At the time, I had laughed. Now I understand. We work so hard for control, for symmetry, for balance, for perfect illumination. We rule our lines with thread, measure every border,
calculate pigment to the last grain. But life does not follow margins. It slips in, quietly, soft-footed, undeniable. Matilda walks where kings dare not tread. She has stepped across illuminated saints and devils, across the Song of Songs and the Lamentations. Once she knocked over a pot of red lead onto an image of St. George. Brother Lucian swore it was intentional. "There are no dragons in this abbey," he said, "so she made one." There's a strange grace in these interruptions, a reminder that we are not gods, that our books, though sacred, are made by hands, hands that tremble, spill, smudge, that cats walk across what we think is holy, and the heavens do not fall. Sometimes I think Matilda is the truest illuminator among us. She adds without planning, she breaks without guilt. Her work appears suddenly, without forethought or permission, and it is honest, pure even.
A paw dipped in ink, a tail brushing wet pigment, a sudden meow in the middle of silent labor. It reminds us that silence is never absolute. Even now, she leaps lightly down from her perch and trots toward the open window, tail held high. Outside, the courtyard glows with late morning sun. Bees drift lazily between lavender stalks. A novice hands laundry nearby, lost in some internal hymn. Matilda disappears beneath the hedge. I return to the page. The paw prints have dried now, no longer smears, but fossils. I study them. There's something beautiful in their shape. The paths are distinct, gently rounded. The claw marks faint, but there. I could leave them bare, or frame them. I choose the latter. Around the prince I begin a slow spiral of ivy and acanthus, winding gently, as if the leaves had sprung up in response to her steps. I add a bird, small, alert, perched nearby, as if watching the trail, not alarmed, just curious. Then, at the end of the trail, a small crown. Not elaborate, just a band of gold set with 3 tiny dots, ruby, sapphire, pearl. A quiet joke, or a confession, that we are not the only royalty here. Brother Everard passes behind me, glancing down. "A cat again?" he murmurs. I nod. He leans closer. "I once heard," he says softly, "that in Cairo, scribes keep cats in their libraries, not to protect against mice, but to remind them that no knowledge is too sacred to be stepped on." I smile. He walks on. The scriptorium quiets again, the moment fading into routine. But the prints remain. They are no longer a mistake. They are part of the manuscript. A witness to a morning not planned. A story within the story. When this book is finished, when it is bound in leather, carried in procession, shelved in some noble's collection, these paw prints will still be here. Perhaps someone will find them. Perhaps they will laugh. Perhaps they will wonder. Who was the scribe? What happened that day? Why did no one erase them? And in that wondering, the book will speak again. Not just of psalms and saints, but of cats and mischief, and of the holy art of not taking oneself too seriously. I dip my quill, and at the foot of the page, just beneath the crown, I write in the smallest script I can manage. Matilda fated hoc. Matilda made this. My fingers ache. It is not pain exactly, but a deep, slow fatigue that rises from bone and tendon, like a low chant echoing from within the body. A kind of weariness that doesn't ask for rest, only for silence. The light has changed. The high windows cast long gold slants across the scriptorium floor,
fractured by the mullioned panes into angled mosaics. The wax from my candle has formed a tiny lake in its brass holder, rippling slightly in the draught from the western arch. It is nearly time to stop, but not yet. There is one letter left to write, just one. A single illuminated O to begin the final antiphon on the page. O Oriens, splendor lucis aeternae. O radiant dawn, splendor of eternal light. A fitting end to the day. I ready my finest quill, one trimmed thinner than a hair, kept in a separate bundle wrapped in linen. I have used it only 3 times before. It is too delicate for anything hurried. But this is not a time for haste. The parchment glows faintly beneath the last light, its surface warm, almost alive. I trace the circle of the O lightly in graphite, a perfect roundness, not rigid, but breathing. Then I pause. The letter must hold both the mystery and the promise of light. How do you draw dawn? I think of it often, though I rarely see it from outside these stone walls. I remember childhood mornings in the village, how the sun touched the fields with gold, how frost shimmered like angel breath before vanishing into warmth.
I remember my mother standing in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, waiting for the light to reach the floorboards. It is not brightness I want to paint, but arrival. I begin with red. A soft vermilion wash at the base of the letter, bleeding gently upward. Then a stroke of gold ink just along the inner edge, catching the curve like a whisper. I blend in shell white at the top, pale as breath. Inside the letter, I paint a tiny window opening to a horizon. Just a hint of hills, a sliver of sun. The figure of a man, or perhaps a monk, kneeling in profile as light brushes the side of his face. It is not a self-portrait, not entirely, but there is something of me in it. I pause, letting the ink settle, the brush dry. I roll my shoulders slowly. The muscles respond with resistance. I've been hunched too long. My legs have forgotten what it means to stand. Around me, the scriptorium is quieter than usual. Brother Hugo has already stopped, his head bowed, hands folded. Whether in prayer or exhaustion, I do not know. Brother Felix cleans his brushes, each motion ritualistic. Across the room, Brother Anselm sleeps openly, slumped over an unfinished genealogy. A blot of ink has bled across the page where his cheek rests. No one wakes him. We have all been there. Even the air seems softer now, as if it too is preparing to leave the day behind. I add one final detail, a sliver of blue sky, ultramarine diluted to a whisper, just enough to hint that the darkness is retreating, that light, even in small measure, has come. I lean back. The page is still damp, but complete, not perfect, but whole. I close the inkwell. The lid clicks softly, an ending. I wrap my tools in cloth, brushes, quills, knives, each one returned to its place, tucked in linen, tied with cord. My palette is nearly dry. The blue has cracked slightly at the edges. I scrape what remains into a small jar, mindful not to waste even a flake. The scriptorium is darker now. The candles burn low, their flames thin, their light golden and shy. The sounds have softened, the occasional cough, the creak of a bench, The whisper of cloth against stone as someone rises. No voices. None are needed. I look down at the O. It is not grand, not like the elaborate initials of Brother Everard or the gilded wonders of Brother Audric's prime, but it carries weight. It breathes, and in it, I hope, there is a stillness that someone, somewhere, someday, might recognize. A moment of dawn held in the hand. My fingers are stained with ink, my thumb smudged with red, the nails rimmed in gold dust. A small pain throbs beneath my right shoulder blade. I close my eyes just for a moment. I think of all the letters I have written today. More than 300, some simple, some ornate. Each one drawn, not written, built slowly, shaped by thought, carved in breath. They form a forest behind me. I will not remember them all, but they are there, on the page, in the silence, in the weight of my hands. I rise slowly, gathering my folio, covering it with a cloth. It is not finished. Tomorrow there will be marginalia to add, a vine perhaps, a bird in flight, maybe something stranger if the day allows. But for now the O remains, the last letter of the day, a circle, a promise, a breath. Outside the evening bells begin to ring. The monastery turns toward vespers, a final psalm, a final chant, then rest. I walk toward the door. The scriptorium behind me flickers in candlelight. Shadows stretch long across the floor, mingling with the memory of words. I do not look back. Some things must be left in silence. Evening comes not with darkness, but with softness. The monastery breathes slower now. The stones feel warmer beneath my feet, as if the day's silence has seeped into them and settled there. The halls are hushed but not empty. Footsteps echo gently against the worn floors, unhurried. No one speaks unless it is necessary. There is a hush that gathers after vespers, a hush not made by silence, but by stillness. It rests in the folds of robes, in the flicker of oil lamps, in the low, open-throated murmur of prayers murmured without sound. I walk slowly through the cloister, fingers trailing across the cool surface of a stone column. A breeze moves through the archways, carrying with it the scent of rosemary and dusk. Somewhere above, a bird sings, its final call before sleep. 3 notes, falling like the end of a sentence. The prayer book is heavy in my hands, not because of its size, but because I know it so well. Each page is familiar, my work or another's. The illuminations gleam softly in the failing light, their gold dulled to amber. The saints no longer shine, they wait. In the chapel we kneel. The floor is cold even through the wool of my robe. I shift, only slightly, aligning my knees with the grooves worn by 100 others before me. We all find our places, not by sight, but by memory. No one is told where to go. We simply arrive. The chant begins, soft and low. No melody, only a single tone, passed from voice to voice like a flame. O lux beata trinitas et principalis unitas. O blessed light of the Trinity and unity most high. My voice joins the others, not loud, not leading, just one among many. I do not need to understand every word. I know the shape of the chant, the way it rises and settles.
The syllables become breath. The breath becomes rhythm. The rhythm becomes stillness. The candles flicker in time. I close my eyes. Behind my lids, the colors of the day linger. The ultramarine folds of the Virgin's robe, the grin of the gargoyle in the corner, the faint glow of shell gold around the kneeling monk inside the O, the paw prints, Matilda, asleep again in the chapel's corner, curled like an illuminated capital. She always comes here at night. Perhaps she too is drawn by the cadence, or perhaps she simply enjoys the warmth.
We sing through the Magnificat. My voice begins to slow, not by will, but by gravity. Each word feels suspended in honey. The final syllables stretch like threads drawn gently through a needle's eye. My eyes stay closed. I see my tools in the scriptorium now quiet. The quills laid to rest, like swords sheathed after battle. The pigments covered, the brushes rinsed, the candles low. The work sleeps. I wonder, as I often do, whether the saints we draw see us, whether the angels, tucked into corners of gold-leafed frames, watch us kneel. Do they remember the touch of our hands on their wings, the pressure of our brush on their faces? Or are they sleeping too? We rise for the final prayer. The prior speaks, a blessing in Latin, familiar, worn smooth by repetition. We bow our heads. The words fall like leaves, dry and beautiful. Then silence, true silence, the kind that stretches, not empty, but full. Full of what was said, of what was sung, of what was never spoken. I remain kneeling longer than the others, not out of piety, but because movement feels too loud. My body has not caught up with the bell. When I finally stand, the chapel is mostly empty. A few candles remain flickering near the altar. One monk sits in the far corner, back straight, eyes open, unmoving. I do not disturb him. Outside, the sky is deep blue. Not yet night, not quite day's end. That strange, sacred in-between, where things soften into truth. I walk the path back toward the dormitory, but slowly, slowly. In the garden, the fountain trickles. Its sound mingles with the breeze, with the echo of chant, with the pulse of my own heartbeat. I pause. I feel the urge to stay outside, to sit by the rosemary bush, to listen longer, to let the last fragments of light press gently into my skin. Instead, I enter. Inside, the hall is dim. My room is plain. Wooden cot, small table, a shelf with 3 books. The Psalms, the Hours, a volume of dreams I once began but never finished.
I remove my robe, wash my hands. The ink remains, faint stains in the lines of my fingers. No amount of scrubbing will erase them. They have become part of me. Like the letters I wrote today, like the margins I decorated, like the fox, the lion, the blue that came from far away. I lie down. The straw mattress creaks, shifting beneath me like an old friend. I fold my hands across my chest, then release them. The darkness is not total. Moonlight slips through the high window, painting silver lines across the stone. I watch them blur, my breath slows. I do not pray aloud. There is no need. The work was the prayer. The chant was the silence, the answer. And in the hush that follows, I think. Perhaps the book is never finished. Perhaps the story continues, even in sleep, especially in sleep. The gold fades slowly. It does not vanish. It withdraws, surrenders, as if even it, too, is tired. The pages no longer gleam in candlelight. They glow, soft and inward, like memory, like breath caught in a half-opened door. In the silence of the dormitory, I sit up once more. Just for a moment. There's a page I did not finish, not with ink, not with pigment, but with a thought I could not quite shape, a letter half-dreamed, a margin left waiting. I do not light a candle. I do not move. Instead, I let the image come to me, slowly, from within. A page. Blank. But it does not wait for words. It waits for stillness. In the center, a circle. Perhaps a sun, or a coin. Perhaps an eye. Gold, but not bright. Dull gold. The kind that remembers light more than it gives it. Around it, tiny stars. Not painted, not drawn. Implied. They flicker and fade, like breath caught between sleep and sky. I imagine a small creature sleeping in the corner, curled, safe, not watched. A fox? A child? A shadow? Does it matter? I think of all the pages I have turned, all the ones I never finished, all the ones I never began. I think of the margins we carry inside us,
where strange things live, the faces we do not draw, the words we do not write, the colors we imagine but never mix, and still, somehow, they stay with us, even now. The room is colder, the stone beneath me deeper, the world thins around the edges. I close my eyes, but the gold remains, inside the eyelids, behind the breath, curling like smoke into the corner of thought. There is no book in my hands, only silence, only the echo of a quill no longer moving, only the feel of light where none remains. I lie back. I think of the first line I ever copied, crooked, shaky, half-formed. It was the word initium, the beginning. I did not know then how many pages would follow, how many hours, how many nights. I did not know that beginning something meant never truly ending it. Even now, the work continues, not in ink, but in stillness, in memory, in the hush between candle and ash, in the space where sleep begins. The ink dries, the gold settles, and the page, once filled with purpose, breathes now in stillness. There is nothing left to paint, nothing left to perfect, only the quiet after creation. The room is dark, not with shadow, but with gentleness, a kind of velvet dimness that invites the eyes to close. The candles have stilled, the air is cool, and even the stones seem to rest. Outside, the stars have gathered, silent congregants in a chapel of sky. Above them, the moon leans forward, not to illuminate, but to listen. The scriptorium sleeps. The fox in the margin curls tighter into itself. The saint lowers her gaze.
The gargoyle, once grinning, now seems to sigh, and somewhere in the folds of an illuminated vine, a tiny painted bird tucks its head beneath a gilded wing. All the colors grow softer, all the edges blur, like ink in water, like memory sinking beneath the surface of thought. You are not alone here. The books remember. The silence remembers. Even the smallest brushstroke remembers the hand that made it.
Let your breath slow like a turning page. Let it fall into rhythm with something older than speech. With the hush that came before the first letter. With the quiet that follows the last one. Float now, like gold dust in water, like a feather forgotten in a vellum margin. Let yourself dissolve gently into sleep. No need to finish the prayer. It has already been heard. No need to hold the page. It has already turned. The work is done. The night has come. And still the stars shine, softly, quietly, just like you.